on to the next part of the story. Oh, I gotta show you this. I colored a picture. It's supposed to be a house and a driveway and a garage. The Shelby's in the garage. And I don't know what it is, but I think I really like this chair. It's just really, yeah. Away from and in front of the Foundry. A quotation. Those of us who are still animated in our vessels too often disregard the sanctity of life. Most often, it is not until the bleak foreverness into which we are ferried by death that lacking teaches us the meaning of wanting. Anonymous. The current year is 2026 on Earth 4. In Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, is a city 25 kilometers, or roughly 20 minutes west of Toronto, Ontario, by public transportation. Mississauga is an ethnically diverse and economically reasonable city to live and work, especially while raising a family. One such house was called home by 5 unique people. What a better way than any other, hiding unique people among a city of people in plain sight. At 11:15 a.m., a tall, raven-haired woman closed the driver's door of a dull violet minivan and walked up to the main entrance of the high school. At the main office, Agnes, the secretary, greeted the woman. "Good morning, Mrs. Green." The raven-haired woman replied, "Good morning, Agnes." "What did they do this time?" Taken aback and trying to be polite, Agnes said, "No, Mr. Pilkington will explain everything," while adding, "That is quite a unique ring, Mrs. Green." Mrs. Green was wearing a length of timing fuse tied in a double knot on her left-hand ring finger. "Thanks," said Mrs. Green. "It's timing fuse for explosives." Agnes and Mrs. Green looked at each other until the maximum level of uncomfort had been reached, and Agnes began to laugh, and Mrs. Green grinned with a wide-eyed expression. Agnes, trying to stifle laughter, said, "Oh, Mrs. Green, you and your husband, always the jokesters." Jane Green smiled politely and pointed beyond the desk, asking, "May I?" Still in a giggle fit, Agnes waved Mrs. Green through the principal's office. Once inside the cozy office, Mr. Pilkington greeted Mrs. Green and objectively described the events of the morning that had caused to summon parental involvement. According to the account Mr. Pilkington relayed to Mrs. Green, what had happened was her daughters were being bullied by a large group of students when some of those students initiated physical violence and her daughters defended themselves. In her mind, Jane saw herself years ago wearing full snow gear in the wilderness on planet Vulpus, racking a shotgun and yelling, "And?" However, calmly and politely, Jane asked, "And?" Mr. Pilkington explained that his administration was fine with the course of events up to this point. However, her daughters chased the instigators into the bathroom, as causing them to now be the ones fleeing, not pursuing. Jane Green shifted in her chair, looked across the office at 2 identical freckle-faced, raven-haired teenage girls, and said, "Oh, I see." Both girls' heads dropped. Jane asked, "Do you two have anything to say?" "No, wait. Mr. Pilkington, are they suspended?" Mr. Pilkington adjusted his glasses, saying, 5 full days. Jane rapidly bent her fingers, counting them, and saying, "Since today's Friday, they can come back in 2 Mondays, correct?" Mr. Pilkington cleared his throat softly and stated, "That would be correct, Mrs. Green." Jane shifted her attention back to her twins, declaring, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." Several moments of silence followed. Jane coaxed gently, "Girls." Finally, one tear-stained freckle face was lifted, and it was explained, "Mom, all of them were doing it again." Fire was ignited behind Jane Green's eyes as she calmly requested, "Girls, stand up, please." The identical raven-haired girls promptly rose with their heads held up. Jane continued, "Mr. Pilkington." "Yes," he replied. "What," asked Jane, "are the girls' first names?" Mr. Pilkington stated matter-of-factly, "Emery and Emmeline." "Mr. P," said Jane, "can you identify the girls individually?" Mr. Pilkington adjusted his glasses again, saying, "No, it is much easier when they are dressed in dissimilar fashion." "Mr. P," said Jane again, "are you aware of the taunting that is doled out to my two angels? Apparently some students at this school are incorrigible hayseeds who, out of hilarious necessity, must constantly tease these two. Just because the first syllable of their names are identical, these straw-chewing mouth-breathers find it funny to call them the name of a certain candy-coated chocolate that sounds identical. Mr. Pilkington, we will take the 5 days, with severe consequences for the girls at home in the interim. Please advise the rest of your student body on remedial manners." Jane stood and gestured to the girls to exit and followed them all the way to the minivan. Emery and Emmeline occupied their usual seats, the two captain's chairs in the center of the van, and were silent as their mother sat and closed the driver door. A few moments passed with no words. Then both Emery and Emmeline inhaled softly to begin speaking when Jane belted out in a top-lung scream. The scream was so long-winded the twins began to worry, and looking at each other with wide eyes began to scream at the same pitch as their mother. This went on for a few more moments until, screaming, Jane opened one eye and looked at the girls' ridiculous facial expressions in the rearview mirror that she finally broke down in hysterical laughter, falling over in her seat. As the twins realized that they had been had, they both yelled, "Mom!" Jane immediately sat up and spun around, her face beaming, saying, "I can't believe you got it in your first fight. Tell me." Jane's expression now turned feral. "What was the smell of their sweat?" The twins sat silently and motionless until they laughed and said, "Mom, you're so weird." Jane straightened up in her seat, buckling her safety belt, saying, "Fine, don't tell me. First on your list of consequences, you girls are explaining to your father why you were both suspended for 5 days. Light groaning was coming from behind Jane, so she continued, "You can also clean your aunt's side of the house." More groaning issued forth along with the feeble statement, "At least Aunt Julie loves us." Jane raised the volume of her voice slightly, "And wash and wax the Shelby." Jane looked in the rearview mirror to see the girls whispering to each other. As a parent of twins, this is what Jane thrived upon, observing their interactions with each other. Ever since being pregnant with them, Jane loved watching, listening, then holding, sniffing, and loving both of them. As the twins grew and their personalities grew as individuals and as a unit, it was extraordinary to behold. Jane's favorite thing in the world was being a parent. As their mother pulled the minivan into the driveway of their home, the twins stared at the plastic toy superglued to the dashboard, asking, "Mom, what's with the purple dinosaur again?" "First of all," replied Jane, "it is a violet dragon, and I just like it." The twins replied, "Sure, Mom." The Greens' property was the last on their street and was backed up to an acre of coniferous trees. In the winter months during snow, Mr. and Mrs. Green spent much time playing amid the trees. The twins truly did have strange parents. At the back of the property, on the edge of a very long driveway, was a garage that held a 1966 Shelby GT350 covered with a shroud. The Greens' home was rather large, and it was a joined duplex as one structure. Lucas, Jane, Emery, and Emmeline lived in one half, and the girls' Aunt Julie lived in the other. In truth, most members of the family often traveled back and forth, contributing to the warm family atmosphere throughout. The twins, followed by Jane, all entered the house through the side door and directly into the kitchen. Lucas Green was seated on a tall stool at the breakfast bar on his laptop. Closing the laptop and standing just in time to bodily catch both Emery and Emmeline, who were blubbering and crying, "Oh, Daddy, it was terrible," as they collapsed into him. Lucas smiled at Jane, asking, "Babe, did you leave the girls at the mall with no money again?" Jane stomped forward toward her husband in a full giggle fit, struggling to say, "Lucas, I swear, if you even..." Lucas used his daughters as human shields, saying, "You have to go through them to get to me." "Daddy, Daddy," the girls exclaimed, pulling away, and the scene quickly devolved into a potholder, towel, and any other soft object that was within arm's reach play fight until Jane extended the kitchen faucet and doused everyone and many surfaces, ending the melee. Lucas looked at his Mars Mouse watch, sternly asking, "Why aren't you two in school?" With dripping hair, Emery and Emmeline spoke in unison with their heads down. "They did it again," they said. Lucas rubbed his stubbled chin with his watch arm, acknowledging, saying, "I see. That stupid candy again. So what happened?" Emery and Emmeline stood in silence, fearful of their father's disapproval. Jane stepped over to Lucas and, facing in the opposite side of the kitchen, while speaking softly into his ear. This was Lucas and Jane's favorite parental tactic, as the girls could barely hear their mother, having only their father's facial expressions to gauge impending parental disappointment. Jane and Lucas were now experts in this showmanship and often used these moments to whisper sweet nothings or discuss groceries while Lucas threw the twins red herring facial expressions. "And then," explained Jane quietly as she explained the full events of the morning, Lucas's face showed genuine shock and the twins' faces fell. Their world might as well be over. They would be kept locked up in this house until they were 30 years old. Lucas and Jane took a half step back from each other, grinning like fools. Lucas asked, "So, who is everyone?" Jane replied, "Well, I mean like," and then she stopped to bob her head from side to side, "everybody." The twins looked confused and pensive. Lucas and Jane took up each other's hands in their own, with Lucas asking, "Is it time?" and Jane replying, "I know they're ready." The twins were now less pensive, yet more confused and scared as they both spoke. "What is going on?" Jane yelled suddenly across the entire house, "Julie!" Lucas said calmly, "Get in the van. We're all going for ice cream." The twins scrunched up their noses at each other, very perplexed. At the ice cream shop, everyone was happily eating ice cream for lunch when Julie whispered to Jane, "What gives?" raising her ice cream up for display. Jane licked her own spoon clean, whispering, "It's time. Can you be ready tomorrow?" Julie's eyes grew wide as she popped her gum around her ice cream, saying, "Like now? Like tomorrow now?" Jane nodded while smiling and taking another bite. Julie sprawled across the table, looking directly into the eyes of Emery and Emmeline, and asked, "What did you guys do?" Later at the Greens' house, dinner was prepared and eaten early as usual, since Friday night was Jane and Lucas's standing date night. With all five of them at the same table over meatloaf and fancy green beans, Julie again ventured her question in a different form. "Emery, Emmeline, what did you really do?" The twins did not speak, but looked around at the table from adult to adult and chewed their food. Julie's fork dropped on her plate loudly. Not making eye contact, Jane said, did something I would have done. Oh, said Julie calmly, taking a drink of her water, and then in the next moment, full realization set in, causing Julie to spray water from her lips. Oh, no, said Julie, stunned. Is anyone in the hospital? Are the girls going to jail? Are we going to be on the news? Lucas replied, no, nothing like that. But there will be certain consequences while they are suspended, such as you will stay with them tonight. Friday is date night. Suddenly, Julie concocted her own consequences for the girls. Later that evening, stepping off of public transport and now in Toronto, in front of Club Bijou, Jane and Lucas were met at the door by the owner of the club, a fashionably dressed woman with shoulder-length blonde hair and wearing so much jewelry she looked like a security guard's worst nightmare. Jane and the woman leaned in, whispering, "Hi, sister. Hi, sis." The owner showed Jane and Lucas, to a reserved table and removed the sign. Presently, their standing drinks order was delivered to the table as they made small talk. Suddenly, the house lights went black and everyone started clapping. The horn section of the band sounded like it had been dipped in poisoned molasses, all working together at first and then flaring, wailing and sirening off at tangents and then rocketing back down to the stage, pulling on your heartstrings and your earlobes. The piano man was working every ivory key like it had hot butter poured across. The drum kit sounded like gunshots or the tax man at the door, chains being dragged across the pavement and elephants marching all at once. All in a half backbeat sort of dead time that motivates you to take one last drink before you skid to the dance floor with your smiling partner in hand. Just then, the wax-mustached, wearing three-piece suit and a matching handkerchief, was a gold chain watch in his pocket. The front man slides across the stage in his patent leather shoes and slowly begins coaxing the crowd into a call and response. Jane and Lucas lived it up, dancing and socializing until Club Bijou's lights came back on. Meanwhile, in Mississauga, Aunt Julie was divulging family secrets about espionage, welding, and explosives, alien life from other planets, the Foundry, the dragons, and outer space. The twins blinked at Julie, saying, "No, Aunt Julie, we're just Canadian, that's it." Julie snapped her pink gum and loudly chewed it back into her mouth while shifting her gaze back and forth between Emery and Emmeline. The twins stared back at their aunt without flinching. Slowly standing up from sitting cross-legged on the floor, Julie went to her closet and retrieved a red tin box with a red and white plaid dome lid. As she sat on the floor again, the Kitty and Mouse logo character lunchbox was now visible to the twins. Still staring at Emery and Emmeline, Julie flipped the latches and turned the lid over, exposing the contents. The twins inspected the items visually and stared at Julie before both of them stated, "This looks like your grandma's brick cell phone, a laser pointer, and a dog's fetch toy. You should sell that lunchbox on the internet. It looks vintage." Julie's gum snapped and wrapped her nose and chin in a sticky mess. "What?" asked the twins. Pulling the gum from her face and standing, Julie said, "Let's try this another way. Grab your jackets. Outside." At the wood-splitting stump in the backyard, Julie opened the lunchbox, removed the laser pointer pen, and demonstrated for Emery and Emmeline while saying, "Just like so." And, just like so, Julie split a 2-foot section of wood in 6 precisely equal vertical slices. The twins were mesmerized as Julie handed them Ocean's high-powered cutting laser. "Now finish the pile," said Julie, waving to the large stack of unsplit wood. The girls took turns splitting and stacking and finished just as their parents arrived back home. Julie coaxed the laser pen from Emmeline and placed it in the red tin lunchbox, relatching it. Loitering at the side entrance door, Lucas saw the freshly split and stacked firewood, asking, "What's all this?" Emery and Emmeline and Julie grinned from ear to ear, while Julie said, "Constructive consequences." Jane, who was still dancing and turning, howled, "Woo! Firewood!" as Lucas guided her into the house. "Let's go back on my side," said Julie to the twins. "Give your folks some, privacy." Emery said flatly, "Ew." Emmeline said dryly, "So gross." Julie rolled her eyes as she followed the twins back in the house. In Julie's living room, the twins were both inverted on the sofa, and Julie was explaining the dog's fetch ball and the brick phone. In regard to the phone, Julie explained that it had one number saved and to only use it if someone was dying. The ball was serial and a detonator switch to a nuclear weapon that could destroy an entire planet. Emery said, "Boring." Emmeline said, "We're tired, Aunt Julie." Julie's gum snapped against the covering her nose and chin, saying, "Fine, I tried. Good night, girls." Later, in the wee small hours of Saturday morning, Julie's mobile phone rang, and it was Agent 3. In hushed tones, information was rapidly relayed, and then hanging up, Julie bounded across the duplex, knocking on Jane and Lucas's bedroom door. Wrapped in a bedsheet and seeing Julie's tears streaming, Jane said, "Lucas." "Julie, what's wrong?" Gagging as she was crying, Julie said, "There was an accident. Agent 1 is dead."